acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which we meet today, the Turrbal people, and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. We have a video. If it works. I should have added technology to the barriers. I don't know who that is, but they look like they're having a lot of fun. Well, while we're waiting for the video to start, I would also like to thank all of you, especially the early childhood educators in the room. Last year you had to put so much of yourself into your job, and you carried yourself, your colleagues, your families and communities through this pandemic, and you continue to show up each day doing the incredible work that you do. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. And to those on Zoom, for this presentation, please make sure you have pants on. We will be asking you to stand up. Alright, so honey, could you just play the next slide video? Thank you. Oh, I've got the remote. On stage, partly through the presentation. So our agenda today is to discuss the barriers, and yes, I am a physical person, so you actually have barriers, and the red tape that sometimes, or all the time, gets in the way for the national education sector. That includes early childhood all the way through to high school, and how we can support, so we being Montessori, Australia's goals to reach true inclusion. So our first barrier will be parents, then we will discuss teachers, us as a collective, the Montessori sector, and the public system. So I'm going to start with parents, because that's how I came into Montessori. As a parent, I was given the book Montessori Madness. Hands up if you've read that one. That is, my neighbour gave it to me. 3 months later, I Montessori started, and I hired a teacher who was Montessori trained, and we got access for children here in Brisbane. As a parent, you have lots of boundaries, or you have lots of barriers in the decision on whether to choose your child, to send your child to Montessori. For some of those, the barriers can be that I just can't get access. If you're a centre here in Brisbane, most of us are full. We have no positions for the children, for the parents who want it. And 8 years ago, when I first came into Montessori, it was even worse because there was less centres around. Now we've got more centres, but those occupancy levels are high. So a barrier could be that I can't get in. Then as a parent who sent my child to Brisbane Montessori, which is an amazing school, the fear when they turn 5 or they get to that prep age, and even though I was across Montessori, I still had the internal fear of where everybody else is going to that school. That's all that I know. So making sure you've got pants on, guys, at Zoom. Can you guys stand up, and everybody stand up in the room, not just the Zoom guys.
So we want you to take a minute to think about your own educational experience. Sit down if you personally went to a traditional school.
One. Ooh, did you see that? Half and half? Okay.
Now, stay standing if that was a Montessori school experience that you had. Ooh, that shows a lot, doesn't it? Wow.
So, you can all sit down now. For those on Zoom, I'm trying to talk to the camera because it's really hard to there's 50 people on there. About 95% of the room sat down and had traditional education. There is nothing wrong with the education that we have. Well, I'm not talking about this because we're being inclusive today. You all have your individual experiences, but as a parent, it may have been, when you're making the decision to send your child to Montessori, what you know can affect that decision. My education was fine, I had this okay experience, I'm scared to do something different. Another question or another barrier that gets thrown up a lot is, what about high school? You know, my child, Montessori, primary school is fine, but then they need to fit into high school, and what about university? Financial is a big one. I simply cannot afford it. And that for me is heartbreaking as someone who grew up relatively poor, my mother could not afford to send the four of us to state school, let alone to a Montessori school. I cannot afford to live close enough to the school, so maybe I can make $10,000 work or whatever the price is, but I actually have to travel 45 minutes an hour to be able to get there. Another barrier. Trust is a big one. Can I trust my child to be independent, to make decisions? We have that same internal feeling as a parent when we're at home with our kids. But can I also trust the process of the freedom within limits? So that is barrier one. Is there anything that anybody in the crowd would add that you think is a barrier for parents?
Just one, yeah. And that is that parents seem to think that early education is all social emotional and they'll learn it at school. So they don't need Montessori in the beginning because we don't do social emotional, we're all about academics.
What? Good point.
It's out there, and it's all over, like it's on social media chat groups and things, so it is one of the barriers.
So I think this is the barrier for parents. And I'm not being aggressive, but I really wanted to kick a barrier down. So I really like parents, but I'm kicking that barrier down. So that one is done, we're done. So we're on to...
So we just had one more person.
Oh yes, sorry, sure. Here you go. The barrier's over. Parents are, we've got them sorted.
So I just want to link in here at the moment because something really powerful came across in Christine's conversation yesterday. And that was, as teachers, we can be the barrier. We can have a pedagogical bias. And I know that when we sit here, we love what we do, we're passionate about what we do, and sometimes it's hard to see what's on the other side of the fence. And I think in this perspective, I need you to come at it with your own educational experiences, because I love school. I went to a traditional school, and I loved every second of it. So I want you to keep that in mind as well. Training. Training is a huge barrier for Montessori. Not just for Montessori classrooms, but for just Montessori in general, whether it's in the public system. But in the public system, we have such a rotation of teachers that we need to make sure that we've got something accessible. People can't just jump out and do a year's worth of training somewhere in Bergamo. That would be nice. Got any thoughts on that? But we need to make sure that that education is a quality education as well. I don't know how many times I've heard that thought process of a watered down system. So it has to be quality. It has to be what we genuinely do to make it work in a public system. Mentoring is essential. I would not have known 90% of the stuff that I know today without a quality mentor. Actually, several of them. And still, I gather them. Every year there's somebody new who comes into my life who educates me on something that I didn't know about. We all have them. We'll have that special someone that gives us an idea of how we can be better at our practice every day. School culture. This is a fun one. And actually, I need notes for this one. Being in a public school, school culture is huge. And quite often we talk about the barriers in school culture, the fear of coming into a public school system. One of those biggest things that we talk about is a competition base. Our children are competitive. They don't need to be competitive against each other. We're not rating each other against each other. They grow as individuals. And this is pretty hard to perceive in a public school system. And so maybe this is one of the barriers that hold us back. But how can we make that work? How can we bring it in to be more of a conversation about community? How do we support each other? rewards versus acknowledgements. My Cycle 3 students have actually gone through this process of sitting down, watching an award ceremony, and unpacking the thought processes behind it. They get acknowledgements on a regular basis in the classroom. And they're open to saying, we don't need awards, we have freedoms. And they recognise the gifts that they have in that place, but they also recognise that awards are actually something that happen. And so we need to be quiet observers. We need to acknowledge those who have achieved. So we get the best of both worlds, really. Now, we included an award in there. It's actually a public service award, like a community service award. Just last week, one of our students got an award for their community contribution of going around and picking up rubbish around school every morning. She has a collective of like 7 or 8 students who go around with her every morning with a bag collecting rubbish. Happily. Very happily. Very happily. She's so joyful about it. It's incredible. And they're actually taking bags home now. Don't know what that's about, but it's in preparation for the next morning. One of the other cultural barriers is our voice. I know in a Montessori school, we would be able to tell who wasn't Montessori trained, particularly by the volume of their voice as they walked into a room. They call out across the room to the students, "What are you doing? Get up. Tell me what's going on." It's not every teacher.
Stop walking around. Oh, no, not actually.
Thank goodness, because I need to move. I had a classroom profile done, where the question was, well, I didn't hear you redirect that child. I said, no, you didn't. That's perfect. My job's well done. I don't need to talk across the room. I can do it one-on-one. But that's building that cultural difference, that understanding of what it is that we do. It's not so different. We're still redirecting. We're just taking a different approach. It's a pretty important way to break down a barrier, I think.
Does that mean I literally get to
No, not yet. Language. Our language that we use as Montessorians. We're so good at it. We practice it. We research on the topics. We read Maria Montessori's books. We're fantastic at it. So are traditional school educators. They have their own language. And we know that when we're learning a different language, we have to actually break down those language barriers. A 3-period lesson is very similar to the gradual release model of I do, we do, you do. Now all of a sudden, teachers are starting to understand that what we do is not so different. How cool is that? Teachers are sitting there and unpacking some of these thought processes about different languages to be able to come together and have a common language about how we can better educate all of our children, no matter what system we're in. Directed teaching time. We talk about time slots for teaching. We talk about these split sessions of this is your literacy session, this is your math session, this is when you're doing this work. While Montessori has a little bit more flexibility, we also have directed teaching time. But we also have this personal exploration time. And so for a lot of people outside of Montessori, they see what we do and they go, it's crazy, just let the kids do whatever they want. But we know that's not true. And it's about bridging those language barriers to get other people to realise what it is that we do. Instead of being this mysterious thing on the other side, we could all be working together. What do you think?
Dan, can you just close that barrier up quietly? And then knock it over? Alright, so we're going on to barrier 3. Do you know what's really exciting? We were so excited to go the second day, and I'm speaking too soon because it's not working. We were excited because this was working, and now it's not. Did anybody guess what Honey's middle name is? For those of you, was it Peter or David? I can't remember, Honey. Peter. For those filling out the treasure hunt, there's your answer. All right. Your idea or opinion of yourself. In Montessori, what we do with children is incredible work. How we see the child for who they are, but then when we come together, we stop seeing each other for who we are. It comes down to who did you do your training with, you know, and that I don't think needs to be there anymore. It's the acceptance of differences. So I may have done my training differently to somebody who may have done it in India or the UK. I know that there's people who've done AMI training, there's people who've done MWEI/Montessori Institute training. We need to accept all of the training, or we need to look at it as the fact that these people providing this training that's accessible, and as a solution they're doing it from a positive perspective, that they're trying to fill the gap so that we can meet the needs of more children in Australia. So, I hope you haven't taken your pants off yet, because I need you all to stand up again. And for those at Zoom, I will give you the stats of who sits down when. So, I'm sorry for those whose knees may hurt. And I know that there's one of the guys from Building Futures who's an amazing dancer on the dance floor. He may be struggling today. Okay, so sit down if you are ACMS trained, Australian Centre for Montessori Studies. Sit down if you're AMI trained. Sit down if you're Building Futures trained. Montessori Institute and WEI. NAMC. Sydney Montessori Training Centre. Same one? They're a little bit different. Montessori Training Australia. St Nicholas. AMS.
AMS America or Australia?
Both. Whichever. I am Montessori trained. Alright. And then, who did you do your training with? None? Sit down if you have, pardon? Mentor? No, absolutely, but that is, I can answer that. Wait, next Gemma. Sit down if you don't have any Montessori training. And then sit down if you were trained with any of the other hundreds of providers in the globe, around the globe. Okay, so we are all here together, whether your employer paid for you to be here or you paid for it yourself. Well, we are all here for one collective. For those of you on Zoom, as we progressively went through there was not one provider who was the main provider for all of us in this room. That is what needs to be remembered. Now, hands up, you don't have to get back up. I don't think you are someone, no, so you can sit down and your knees can relax. But hands up if you love Montessori. That is all that we need to know. Because together, I don't care who your training's been with. I just care that you're here for the love of Montessori and that we're here to make this movement greater. Because it means that we're actually changing the world, and it means that more children can get access to Montessori. I didn't wear a skirt today because I needed to put my big girl pants on because I was very scared. And then our support. So I know that it was mentioned earlier about the teachers mentoring program, the teachers supporting teachers. we have, and I know she's on Zoom, Michaela, who is in Townsville, who has joined in on your online TST sessions. We cannot do this job without each other, without mentoring each other. Whether you, what was the guy's name on the dance floor last night? Ryan. And the Coolio Gangster Paradise song. I couldn't sleep right because I'm like, who is this guy? I can just imagine what he was like with children. I figured. But I don't know how long he's been in Montessori for, but I wanted to be mentored by him. It doesn't matter if I'm 8 years, 15 years as a teacher, 37 years, was it? Maxine's gone, but Christine, how long have you been in Montessori for? 30 years. It does not matter. We all have the opportunity to mentor each other, whether you're 2 months into the job or 30 years into it. But we have to actually look at each other as mentors and see ourselves as mentors and realise that being confident in what you know and do, or what you're about and what you want to achieve, doesn't mean that you have to be full of yourself. It does not mean the negative connotation that is attached to ego. So, training is also modernising. So COVID had lots of bad things, but it also had lots of good things. And lots of people have had to learn how to learn online through COVID. And I think that AMI are looking at more online stuff. Is that correct, Christine? Well, I just heard that yesterday you're still with AMI. So are you guys going online? You're trying to do some things online? Yeah.
Yes, online.
Yes. And I know that Montessori Training Australia with Honey, you guys have the professional learning series online. And Vicky, Building Futures, you guys have...
We have Cert 3 in the class group at the moment, which will be a weekend on materials, and the theory will be delivered online. The diploma is still face-to-face, but we may be adjusting some of that as well.
Perfect. And what was that called?
Someone told me Sydney Montessori online.
Sydney Montessori Training. So the point of it is, I think I can only talk on behalf of Australian providers, is that we are looking at online usage from COVID last year is helping more people to understand that you can learn some Montessori online, but the most value is in the mentorship. Yeah? I'm looking at you, you keep looking away from me. Yeah, how are you?
I'm listening.
Okay, so, was there anything else that we need to add to us? Has anybody got anything else they would like to say when we talk about the barriers that we as the Montessori sector put in the way of children accessing this philosophy, this pedagogy, this?
I want to come back to that support process just for a second.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, you go first, and then
Sorry,
Christine.
do you want to go first, Christine? More than happy.
I just wanted to talk a little bit about what Elizabeth was talking about yesterday in terms of ensuring quality. Just about quality assurance as much as anything else, because I think that's a great leveller in terms of bringing everybody together and ensuring that we have authentic Montessori, which will eventually be the element that means that we can all sit down and talk together on the same level. I'm saying it's a barrier at the moment because I think we need the mentors, we need people to be able to say, yes, we're working towards an authentic practice. Now, you can, deconstruct the word authentic. You can say high fidelity, you can say, this is really good Montessori, but what does that mean? Whatever training you've done, you believe is high quality. I just think we need to ensure that we're all on the same page with that one, and there's a way to do that, and that's with quality assurance.
I think it's not just quality assurance, I think you've also got the teachers supporting teachers. There's been a lot of opportunity where Mark in particular has been able to give guidance to your questions. And we come together as a group, collaborating, unpacking the thoughts that we have. And I think one of those common thoughts is, how do we make that time for observation? Because It's something that we all grapple with. We know it's so important, and yet we grapple with it every day. So why not listen to each other? Why not find out what each other is doing in those processes to make sure that we're doing it properly? And I think that's where it comes from. Mentors don't need to necessarily always be somebody who's high up. They don't need to be your middle management people. They could be the teacher sitting right next door. They could be the teacher sitting in the town next to you, or in the next state.
Or even just being okay with letting somebody come and sit on the observation chair in your room.
Yes. I mean, how many times do you get to observe? Have you gone in and observed another classroom? Stand up if you've observed in another classroom in the last month. I love it.
I told them that you weren't going to make them stand up again.
Sorry, I forgot myself. It's the spirit of the moment. You have to watch out for me. And all those people who are sitting down, would you have liked to have been observing in another classroom over the last
You can
month?
just put your hand up.
You don't even have to stand up. I won't need to move this time. But this is how we make it happen, is by bringing us together and being a quality support network with each other. Oh, that's me. Oh, you are up. Again, I'm up again. Right, you get down. Government. The barrier. Take the barrier down. We can't have any. Kick it. Carl said kick it.
I'm a really important person.
In Australia. School priorities. Let's talk about government schools and what are their priorities. They've got a lot of priorities, and I've only got like 3 up there, but they do. There's a lot of priorities. There's getting through curriculum, there's behaviour management, being able to track that data. And it's actually really handy data. It's another tool of observation, just want to point that out there. Grading systems. Montessorians in primary school and high school have grading systems as well. This is not a new concept. According to the Education Act, we actually need to be doing a grading system. It's not so hard. It's probably more about how we do those assessments. Are we doing them through observation? Do we have to have a test paper at the end of it, or can we observe the child at work? Can we teach a whole heap of skills and then have a written set that sits at the end of it, an expectation that they've built towards? Of course we can. It's an assessment piece. Does the child need to know that? No. Does the child need to know that we're going to love and support them and to help them to develop? Yes. Enrollments. I don't know. Enrollments are pretty important if you want to keep a school open for some reason. I don't know why. Bumps on seats. But people want this. People want Montessori. And they can actually increase our enrollments across the globe. I'm only talking Australia, but across the globe there are millions of people who are wanting Montessori education. And they can help boost enrollments. We have an ego as well. And I say we because I'm in a public school system, so I have to include myself in this. Moving past the system of collective mass education. And this is a hard one to get through. The Industrial Revolution actually created the system of mass education because we had a lot of children. How do you teach a lot of children? You put them in a room. And how much of that, if we go back to the Casa di Bambini, I mean, that was put together because these children, in Maria's most delicate words, were feral and uncivilized. And so she put them in a room. She gave them the things that they needed to be able to learn and grow. Mass education is the same, it's just done in a different way. And it's time to maybe rethink how some of that happens. To be able to give people choice. I will not in any way say that mainstream education is not suitable for every child. Both my children went through it. One of them is sitting over there. And they turned out pretty good. I turned out pretty good. You all turned out pretty good. And most of you went to a mainstream school. So we can't completely saying that the system is bad. This is how it's always been done. I've heard that quite a lot. Actually, I think I also heard one that said, "Welcome to Queensland Education." And I think that's the same as saying, well, that's not Montessori. I think it's a cop-out. I think in the grand scheme of things, if we're doing our job properly, we're raising the standard no matter where we are. No matter whether we're a traditional school educator or a Montessori educator. The minute we start saying things like that, we're actually saying, that's it, I can't do anything else. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to be responsible for that, ever. Politics. It's all fun, isn't it? I remember when I first got into this job, I said, I don't want to do the politics, and here I am, loving it, for all it's worth. So let's go back to this education declaration. So every year a bunch of ministers, education ministers from around Australia, all the states and territories, get together, put their heads together and do amazing things. They have amazing conversations. And they talk about the goals. Oh, you got the clicker?
Can't get ahead before you. Oh, wrong way.
Wrong way. And they talk about the goals. The goals for all Australian children. And if you've never read this document, I urge you to read it. You know, we sit there and we criticise the government for their decisions and we see them as this other barrier. But their goals aren't that much different to our goals. And given that 65% of our children are enrolled in public schools, this is where we need to focus our attention for our goals. Goal 1. The Australian education system promotes excellence and equity. Don't we do the same? Sure we do. Goal 2. All young Australians become confident and creative individuals, successful lifelong learners, and active and informed members of the community. Now they're big overarching goals, but it's not until you unpack them and you see the elaborations that you start to go, wow, check this out.
She literally called me and said, wow, check this out.
Okay, and I was a little bit breathless because when I get really breathless, I'm really excited about something. And if you've ever seen me excited, which some of you in the room have, I'm a little bit hard to handle. So we have to say hats off to Rebecca for putting up with me in that state. One of the elaborations, just one, there's actually several of them that go align with this. Children have a sense of self-worth, self-awareness, and personal identity that enables them to manage their emotional, mental, cultural, spiritual, and physical well-being. Isn't that what we've been talking about over the last 2 days? That's that whole child teaching. Tick. If we're ticking boxes, that is. The child can relate well to others and form and maintain healthy relationships. Are able to plan activities independently. And I have to say it's about 20 times independently is written through that document. It's beautiful. Collaborate, work in teams, and communicate ideas. Isn't that what we promote in our multi-age settings? Tick, that's exactly right, it's a tick. Cosmic education. Now, anything that comes in a cosmic education, if I can link it in, whoo, I'm there. I never knew that our education ministers were so smart. Children are creative, innovative, and resourceful, and are able to solve problems in ways that draw upon a range of learning areas and disciplines, and deep content knowledge. There's statements in there about being able to draw on the actions of the past to make decisions for the future. Isn't that what cosmic education is as well? Isn't that what we do every day in our classrooms? I think so. Honey, can you go to the next slide, please? There we go. Okay.
So, Capalaba State College is about half an hour from where we are right now. It is a prep to 12 school, which, as Lachlan says at the tours, makes it a college, but also that we have different providers on site as well. So I was doing one of my rants at an event where somebody who works at Capalaba saw me speak and then introduced me to Lachlan. Our private school site had fallen through. I met with Lachlan week 5 of term 4 in 2019. That's giving us more time, that doesn't sound as dramatic. But it was somewhere around September of 2019. And he goes, yep, which he says a lot. Yep. And we had, let's just say, that term and a bit of Christmas to get classes ready for 2020. That is 4 months. And it was pretty exciting, and I like a challenge, so we did it. But we had 36 children start the first year, and prep to grade 3, so we had a cycle 1 and a cycle 2. We had 2 incredible mainstream teachers. One was at the school already, and one came across. We borrowed her from another school because the red tape in State Education Queensland is you have to borrow, and then they're temporarily here, and then somebody over there is in a temporary role while they're there. Anyway, we enrolled them in NAMC training, which they did while they worked, and then Naomi mentored in the first term because she was on long service leave because she was going to be the principal of the private school. So that is how our first year ran. And then in its second year, which is now, right now, 87 Montessori children. We have prep to year 6, 2 cycle 1s, a cycle 2 and a cycle 3. Yep. And we did manage to convince Naomi to join the dark side. It's not really, it's actually quite bright. And so we have them in our crowd. We have the 2 cycle 1s, Angela Dickey and Nerida Cochrane. Your son's name is not the same and I get confused. And Emma Gaia is our cycle 2, and then Naomi is our cycle 3. And he's already ready to come up on the stage. Lachlan Thatcher is the college principal for the whole school. So do you want to come on and sit there? So if you two want to discuss, well, you can sit down because it's super awkward. So can you both sit down? Yeah. Oh, look at your cool boots, man. Okay, so we are on the slide. No, we're not, because I'm not doing anything. We're going to talk about data because that's exciting. You guys can discuss this part moving forward.
I didn't bring up data.
Oh, we have to wrap up. Can you quickly?
No, I can do that. All right, so let's talk about data. So if we have a look at children, as I said, Queensland Education actually provides you lots of opportunities to be able to look at your data very closely. And I see that, as I said, as another form of observation. So
don't go through it, they can just read it.
Yeah, they can, because it's really, there's a lot there. And you can see it, it's no different to any other Montessori school. Our classes are basically the same. We seem to, attract lots of attention. So we have an enrolment wait list for 2022, which consists of 127 students from prep to year 5. And only 24 of these actually come from Montessori early childhood centres.
Well done.
I'm getting better with my early childhood centres, sorry. We have a huge wait list up until 2025, which says people want this. People are hungry for choice. And that's what it comes down to. It's not whether a system is better than the other, but it comes down to choice. Now we're going to monitor that data. A bit of a longitudinal study as we go through. We're starting to collect things such as from our literacy continuum and the new numeracy continuum. Whether it stays in or not, we'll use it. Everything changes at the blink of an eye, and you've got to kind of go with the flow. We need to develop a forest school curriculum. There's an environmental development, so we're building a connection corridor between the junior campus and senior campus. connecting with Indigenous elders to be able to make sure that we can include things like a yarning circle.
Cycle 4 2023.
Yes,
Can
cycle
you
4.
ask lots of the principally hard questions so that we
I
can
will.
get them in?
Just getting through that, and then cycle 4 in 2023 with hopefully an IB at the end of it. So I guess you've done a lot of work, or you've at least delegated a lot of work. So my question for you is, what have been the major challenges for you putting a Montessori program into the school?
Sure, so the major challenges are that people overthink the system. And I'll just read something to you from Education Queensland, our strategic direction, and just see if it resonates with people in this room. So firstly, when Rebecca approached me a while ago, it fit with my personal philosophies on education. But I don't make those decisions because I work for Queensland Government. So when my regional director and I started looking at whether this fits in with state schooling, it fit quite nicely. So our opportunity is to prepare young people for the future, building resilience and critical thinking skills to prepare young people for jobs in a changing economy. We want every student succeeding. We are inspiring creativity, critical thinking, and building resilience in every student to confidently embrace the opportunities and challenges that life brings. We are supporting the needs of each and every student remains at the heart of our approach as we explore new ways of learning and teaching. We empower every student to engage in learning and achieve growth each year. We nurture student well-being, ensuring they are safe, valued and respected, and we engage every learner through personalised, collaborative and integrated learning experiences. Does that sound like what happens in your classrooms as well? So the difference is not in what we believe and what we want for our children, it's just our execution. It's just how we roll it out inside our classrooms. But we overthink the system. And my example of that is the workplace health and safety officer trying to work out how to prevent children from getting hurt in forest school.
Yes, they climb trees.
They climb trees and play with sticks. And so when somebody was injured and ended up needing a band-aid, the system said, what are you going to do to prevent this from happening again? And my response was, well, nothing, it's going to happen again. But the workplace health and safety officer really struggled with that because they need to write something for the system and they can't click save until they have a solution there. So the biggest challenge is people overthink the system. We all have the same goals. We're just executing them in different ways, but we overthink what the system wants.
So we do have to wrap up.
And it was beautiful to see people that were in the office every 5 minutes getting in trouble, absolutely dedicated and engaged in their learning in their classroom. So going from that environment that just did not suit them, but more than capable in a Montessori classroom with the freedom and the space and the respect. Yeah, so that was the big win for me. The other win for me is to be a state school in a suburban area, an established suburban area, taking enrolments when people are born. That does not happen.
Okay, so I'm wrapping up and we're going. Can I just play the children's voice? It's like 7 seconds.
Yes.
Is that okay?
Not to offend anyone, but the teachers are way nicer in Montessori. Learning through the materials helps you to be independent. The teachers don't yell and scream at you, but they give you lots of time to do your work. I like how the Montessori classroom is set out and how you use the space. It lets you choose your own work and helps you challenge yourself.
I'm skipping through there, there's voices, I'll make a video for you all. But I just wanted to finish on, thank you for having us today, and Montessori Australia has a public schools group that if you want to help get this into more Montessori public schools, then join us.